We're filling people's heads up with ideas. And I think we'll have a break maybe after the session, so they'll be able to digest a little bit. But we're talking about solutions at scale. Tell me a little bit about Target's sustainability strategy as a retailer, which has obviously connections to a lot of different companies.
Yeah, well, good morning, and thanks, Dan. It's great to be here. Target has a long history of corporate responsibility, but 2 years ago, we did launch our new enterprise sustainability strategy, which we call Target Forward, and we intentionally built a vision statement that was around co-creation. Because, similar to the conversation you just had, we don't always have proven solutions to some of these really challenging problems, and yet we know we want to play a role. We know it's important to our guests and to our consumers and our team. And so just really that acknowledgement that the strategy needs partnership and it needs the chance to work in new ways. The other thing I'll share about our strategy was the importance to think about it through the lens of innovation and growth. Many times people do this work because they care about it, they're passionate about it, and that's incredible. We want our team, our communities to thrive, and that's really important. But the reality is we want our business to be relevant. We want our business to be able to be durable and be resilient and set it up for the future. So I really think the topic around scale is so critical. Because if we don't find something that scales, we're not going to reach these goals.
Right. And in partnerships, like people think of Target as a retailer, but you have your own products that you manufacture, and then you've got supply chains and logistics and all of that. So you really need to look at the whole footprint of the company in order to make these goals. Can you talk a little bit about that sort of co-creation and partnership aspect?
Yeah, so we have own brands. We have quite a few own brands that we obviously design and source and bring forth, and we also have national brands. And what I love about that is not only do you have the ability to deliver something pretty compelling to consumers, but you also have the ability to scale in different ways, right? And one of the things that was really important to us was that we looked at it through the lens of listening to our suppliers. And our suppliers, really are at the table to be able to influence and shape our goals, but also we're looking for the common ground. And we're looking for ways in which we can innovate together. And so what I will share is we have approached it in a few different ways, Dan. I think one of them is asking our suppliers to set a science-based target. I know we talked about science being such an important part of the formula. We needed to be driven by science, and we also needed to make sure we all had the data to be able to analyze it and then start to innovate on top of it. So that was really one of our important aspects, as well as asking all of our suppliers to set their own science-based Scope 1 and 2 targets.
So what are some of the things you're doing differently today that compared to 10 years ago, before you had these types of alignment and these goals?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is, when you set the big goals, not only do you need to get the data in the baseline, you actually need to start to integrate it into the business. And so I will say we have a lot of people that want to do this work, but really allowing us to build the right mechanisms and culture to do the work is critical. So what I would say is different today is that you have this sustainability strategy at the start of the strategy. So you don't have a strategic meeting without understanding where the growth is coming from and how innovation is going to be fueled through the lens of sustainability. The other thing I will say is the team is building playbooks, and I think those are really important. Not all the playbooks are fully written, but when I look at something like circularity, we have 2 brands that we are focused on building for the future in circularity and building playbooks by category and understanding then how you design, how you source, how you look at the materials, you look at the whole entire experience would be something that now is being integrated into the organization. Because again, this work requires us to put innovation and sustainability on equal footing of all the great work we've done on profit and growth, right? It requires that same attention and that same due diligence.
You talked about the data, and for a long time, the data just wasn't available. Mm-hmm. And do you feel like you've got enough of it now, and how are you using it to sort of make sure everybody in the organization has access to it and can make decisions with it?
Well, I would say we never have enough data, okay. but I also feel like you need to find the data that's going to solve the problem you want to solve. And maybe I'll go into even just, one of the kind of the data points that I think inspires our team is listening to the consumer. And what we find at our company is our consumer is feeling cost of living changes. They are feeling the impact of climate on their daily lives. And at our company, we have a consumer that is more likely to want to address climate, that wants to seek out sustainable solutions. We have that data that shows which categories matter. And we also know that they are also relentlessly focused on value. And I think one of the unique things we have at our company is to figure out how do you deliver on sustainability and affordability, because the reality is they cannot be mutually exclusive. Like, it needs to be approachable for everyone. And so I think, back to data, you want to understand where is the consumer at, and then how do you start to break down and identify where the barriers are in the value system, in the value chain. And then you start to make the right partnerships to address those barriers, to start to test, iterate, and look for opportunities to scale.
So in terms of your in-house brands, what kind of sustainable products or sustainable decisions have you made with the brands that you control and that you own? Yeah,
well, I'd love to give a few examples on both our brands as well as national brands. One that comes to mind is, one of the insights we had from our consumers is that they wanted to reduce waste. They when I used to run a P&L, I would go into the homes of some of our consumers, and at some point during that visit, they would show a closet full of things, right? And so there was an immediate feeling of, okay, how do I live a life that's more waste-free? And so we created what we call Target Zero, and the whole idea with Target Zero was to create products with either no packaging that's refillable, reusable, or compostable packaging. And we did that not just with our own brands, Dan, but we did that with national brands. Another example I'd love to highlight is one of our beloved national brands, Lego. When you look at Lego's model, kids love Lego. I mean, they love to collect those bricks.
Adults love Lego.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But I have two kids, and it's always an endless, okay, I want to create new things, And so through that partnership, we had shared goals around waste and started to build a program where our guests could easily return their used bricks. And then through Lego, they could be redistributed through different nonprofits. And I share that because, the key is aligning your goals with other partners. The key is really building that collaborative kind of environment, and then learning and testing and trying new things to really deliver on that intersection of growth, value, and sustainability.
It's a very, it's a really radical thing for a retailer to do, because you're really changing the relationship with your customer. For years and years, you're just trying to sell them things, and now you're creating a new relationship with them where you're helping them redistribute things and be part of a community. Do you get any resistance inside the company? Are there people inside that are like, what's the margin on this Lego project?
Yeah, it's a great question. Here's what I'd say. I think as you're working through this work, it's a long-term proposition, right? You can't look at each individual items, each individual categories, roll them up and look at the sum of the parts. The idea is to look at it as a portfolio. And when you look at something like that, you look at traffic. You look at engagement. Did you acquire a new guest? Did you get a deeper relationship with a guest that's willing to engage with you in a different way? And then how do you build that relationship that will matter over time? Because the reality is selling more products, of course, as a growth company you care about, but you really want to build trust. You want to build a relationship, and you want to build something that's going to, again, stand the test of time.
You mentioned the affordability versus sustainability tension. I'm sure you have incredible research on consumer behavior and where people make different decisions and why. Are there any patterns in there? Are there things that people are willing to pay a little bit more for to be sustainable, product categories or does it always come down to price?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Here's what I'll say. I think the winners are going to be those that can figure it out, because the reality is people are thinking about price in this environment, but that's been true in general. So I do think just raising that bar with the team to say, okay, how do you innovate at that intersection of affordability, of joy, of sustainability? But the reality is it does vary by product category. So anything that you eat, anything that touches your skin, there's obviously a premium toward thinking about a holistic view of health, thinking about it in that way. But I just think that's the innovation challenge. Like, we want this to be accessible for everyone. I mean, that is what our view is how do you advance that sustainable living and not leave anyone behind. So I do feel like that's the design challenge that the team wakes up every day to try to figure out.
Yeah, I think it's the green discount versus the green premium.
You got it.
The green discount generally wins out, but I do think that probably in the beauty care, there's some categories people are like, well, I'll pay an extra $1 or $2, but I want to if it's sustainable, that's better for me.
Yeah. I just think it's clear people don't buy it for sustainability alone. And they don't. I mean, they buy it for other reasons, and if it's sustainable, you just strengthen that value proposition, you strengthen that relationship with them. And I think that's where you need to think about it as a tenet of your value proposition versus the reason people would pick you to shop.
Do you have any advice for other retailers, maybe even competitors in the space, in terms of how they can align their processes to sort of mimic Target's?
You know, I mean, a couple of things. You know, one of the examples that I think is really fun to highlight is we have not only a net zero store, a store that produces more power than it needs. We also have a zero waste facility that's been certified by True in Hawaii. And I bring that up, Dan, because when we built all of our roadmaps to align with our goals, we didn't necessarily have all of these activities on our first, year of goals. What happened is the team raised their hand and said, hey, you want to be zero waste? I think we can do something. And that particular facility took it on themselves to initiate everything about getting 90% diversion of their waste from landfill through all the ways that you can imagine, right? Reduce, recycle, reuse, and donate. And I share that because I think the advice is, we know we all need to set these goals. We know we all need to work together. In many instances, we don't have the solutions. And yet, if you can unlock the team to be inspired to say, wait, we can innovate, we can shape, we can bring ideas that will actually, make a difference, it becomes really exciting. And so we were able to have that True certification. And that certification is not just about the waste. Then it goes on to a holistic view of the economic benefits, the sustainable environmental benefits, and the health benefits. And so you start to, again, create a bigger way in which people show up to work, and they deliver on efficiencies, growth, and the impact that I think drives their passion.
I think that's one of the most underreported aspects of sort of sustainability efforts, is that it's great for employee retention. Yeah. It's great for employee empowerment, and especially generationally, like these issues are much more important, more or less, to the younger generations. And like, if you want to attract the top talent, this has got to be part of your company mission. Yeah, and I think you also need to, set up the organization in a way that can actually unlock that passion and that innovation. And I do think, the future is not having these standalone kind of, aspects of work, but really, embedding it in the business where everybody is really clear. Okay, just like I was given all the tools to analyze my business from a guest, from a traffic, from a profit, I have those same tools, right? The same data, the same thing we're working on to also look at it through the lens of sustainability, because we know that through that you're going to see growth and efficiencies. Can you talk a little bit, we're pretty short on time, but just talk a little bit about sort of the role of the Corporate Responsibility Department, Chief Sustainability Officer. These are roles that didn't exist 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago were relatively few and far between. How has that role evolved, and how important is it in sort of just general company infrastructure and structures?
Yeah, well, here's what I'll say. I'm proud to work for a company that has always had this role in place. So it was never a reaction to something that happened. It wasn't from a risk standpoint. It was always because we believed that when our communities are healthy, when our team is healthy, when we're offering something that's good in the environment, that's good for business. And that's a decade. I mean, that's 100 years, quite honestly. That being said, I do think the shift is around thinking about this through the lens of growth and innovation. I think many times people, if they see it as just a passion project, as something to impact the world, that's amazing. But that's not always easy to execute in good times and more challenging times. I think you have to look at it through the lens of, how does this actually help your business? And so I think you will see more and more the shift toward it being around really, at the table with strategy and innovation. One of the most important aspects for an investor to look at a company is innovation, because we know what that does. That fuels growth, that fuels profit, that fuels brand love. And so I do think you're just going to see even more of a connection toward how you think about it in terms of strategy, innovation, and growth. But you still need the experts in the organization. You still need science to drive the work, and so you still need that team that will really actually capability build for the organization to be able to deliver.
Yeah, the ability, and also the company infrastructure to empower them to actually make those innovations and bring those ideas to the table and make them real.
Yeah, I love that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dan, and thank you so much for being here.